The new league year is here. The season officially started on March 15th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and now it is finally time to let the fun begin. Brand new NFL season, but first, the legal tampering period began on Monday, and there were a lot of moves that happened in those 2-3 days. All eyes were certainly on Aaron Rodgers. He went into his crazy darkness retreat, and the question was what his future looked like. And we finally got that answer after he went on the Pat McAfee show, where he did reveal that he had decided to play for the New York Jets. A trade package does still need to be figured out, but Rodgers is going to be a Jet, and they've already signed Allen Lazard, his old wideout in Green Bay. That does also mean that Jordan Love is QB1. Another team with a new QB1 is the Las Vegas Raiders. After they released Derek Carr, the Raiders were in the market for a new quarterback, and that is Jimmy Garoppolo, who inked a 3-year, $67.5 million contract. That obviously reunites him with his old OC in England, Josh McDaniels, who's the Raiders head coach. But that wasn't the only big Las Vegas move. The Raiders did also sign Patriots wide receiver Jacoby Myers to a 3-year, $33 million deal, and Las Vegas also moved on from a big name. The New York Giants ended up making a huge splash on Tuesday by trading for tight end Darren Waller. The Giants only sent a 3rd-round pick to the Raiders, and now Daniel Jones has a nice new toy. Waller at one point was one of the best offensive tight ends in football and did have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2019 and 2020, but he has dealt with constant injuries since, and he's under contract for the next 4 seasons after he inked a 3-year, $51 million extension in September. The Giants have struggled with consistent pass catchers, and that was definitely one of the biggest needs in New York. They even traded first-round pick Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs in October for a 3rd-round pick that they've now sent to the Raiders. So essentially, if you think about it, the Giants kind of traded Kadarius Toney for Darren Waller. It looks like a low value on Darren Waller, but he is somewhat expensive. He's dealt with injuries the last few years, and he does turn 31 in September, which is why he only fetched a 3rd. The Dallas Cowboys went out and bolstered their cornerback play by trading a 5th-round comp pick to the Indianapolis Colts for Stephon Gilmore. He was going to be almost a $10 million cap hit for the Colts, and Indianapolis is clearly rebuilding or retooling, however you want to look at it. New head coach Shane Steichen is in, and they're likely going to take a quarterback in the draft after releasing Matt Ryan. Dallas is a clear contender, and now the defense is even scarier. Stephon Gilmore was obviously a stud with the Patriots a few years ago. It looked like he may have been washed, but last year he looked like his old self and was legitimately one of the best corners in the league, and now he gets to team up with Trayvon Diggs on a truly scary defense that did already extend safety Donovan Wilson and sign linebacker Leighton Vander Esch to return to Dallas. There was not a single team busier on day 1 of tampering than the Bears, who had a really good period of signings. Ryan Poles is doing a fantastic job getting the right guys in there, and there are so many reasons to be excited. The Bears already shipped off the 1st overall pick at the draft to the Panthers for 2 firsts and 2 seconds, plus DJ Moore. Wide receiver was a huge need, and it was settled before tampering even started. Chicago signed guard Nate Davis to a 3-year, $30 million deal. He's an experienced starter from his time in Tennessee. The big moves for Chicago came at linebacker. Now, if you remember, the Bears traded Roquan Smith during the season. Chicago ended up getting a 2nd and 5th round pick for him. He then inked a 5-year, $100 million deal in January with the Ravens. The Bears not only saved that money on him, but they turned around and turned it into 2 linebackers. The first, Tremaine Edmonds, go Hokies. He inked a 4-year, $72 million deal. He played some really good football in his 5 seasons in Buffalo, and he's a 2-time Pro Bowler. The other is TJ Edwards. He was a 3-year starter in Philly, and he was really a staple on that successful defense last season with 99 tackles. He'll fill a big need in Chicago too for just $19.25 million over the next 3 years. Now, the Eagles have already lost a ton of players this offseason. Defensive tackle Javon Hargrave left for the Niners. Safety Marcus Epps is joining the Raiders. Obviously, I already brought up TJ Edwards is out. Linebacker Kaiser White going to the Cardinals. And offensive tackle Andre Dillard is signing with the Titans. Not only that, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a free agent. It looks like Miles Sanders is going elsewhere. Isaac Seumalo is a free agent. And to put the cherry on top, they also released cornerback Darius Slay. So after a really good season, Philadelphia is losing a lot. The Denver Broncos quietly made a few really important moves during the tampering period. The offensive line was one of the biggest issues last season, and it hindered the team for sure. Even if a lot of that was due to injury, Denver spent some serious money on linemen. The Broncos inked tackle Mike McGlinchey to a 5-year, $87.5 million deal. He was a staple on the 49ers offensive line for the past 5 seasons. Denver also signed guard Ben Powers to a 4-year, $52 million contract. Powers has been a reliable starter for the past 2 years in Baltimore. Denver made a lot of other moves. They signed Jared Stidham to be the backup to Russ, but the only other move I'd consider big was inking defensive lineman Zach Allen to a 3-year, $45.75 million contract. He had 9.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons as a member of the Cardinals. The Atlanta Falcons spent a lot of money during the tampering period. One of the big moves was locking up guard Chris Lindstrom on a 5-year, $105 million deal. A good long-term deal for a pretty good guard who did just make his first Pro Bowl and was named a second-team All-Pro. Atlanta also brought back tackle Caleb Gary on a 3-year, $34.5 million deal. The Falcons released Marcus Mariota about 2 weeks ago. That made Desmond Ridder the expected starter going forward, and that also left a big hole at backup, which has been filled by Taylor Heineke. This one, it sucks to see him leave Washington. He started the majority of the games for the Commanders over the past 2 years, and now he cashes in on a 2-year, $20 million deal. I'm so pumped to see him get his bag. The Falcons also traded a 7th to New England for tight end Jonnu Smith. Atlanta wasn't done there either. The Falcons made some big moves on the defensive side of the ball. The Falcons signed defensive lineman David Onyemata to a 3-year, $35 million deal, but the big splash was at safety. Atlanta inked former Bengals safety Jesse Bates to a $64 million contract over 4 seasons. Cincinnati has now lost both of their starting safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell, who signed a 3-year, $22.5 million deal in Carolina. After losing Jacoby Myers, New England signed Juju Smith-Schuster for the exact same 3-year, $33 million deal that the Raiders actually gave Myers. The Commanders did also ink their new backup quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. Sam Howell is set to be the guy in Washington, but now he has a good vet behind him that is more than capable of starting if he needs to. Those were really the teams that the tampering period had a really big impact on, but there are some big names that you need to know. First and foremost, Ezekiel Elliott was cut by the Cowboys. He's now going to be able to sign wherever he wishes once that goes through. There were a handful of quarterbacks that are now elsewhere. The most important is probably Baker Mayfield. He signed a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers. Now he's going to be in a quarterback competition with Kyle Trask, but he may actually be the starter unlike the rest of the big names that moved. Andy Dalton is on a 2-year deal with the Panthers. He could start a few games for the Panthers, but he's essentially just going to be the bridge for whatever quarterback Carolina drafts. Sam Darnold is headed to San Francisco to join a quarterback room that already has Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. Case Keenum signed a 2-year deal with the Texans, and former Jets quarterback Mike White is heading to Miami on a 2-year contract to back up Tua Tagovailoa. A couple of other notable moves: David Montgomery joining division rival Lions on a 3-year deal, and Jawan Taylor signing a very lucrative 4-year, $80 million contract with the Chiefs, which likely does mean that tackle Orlando Brown is on the prowl for a new team. There are definitely more free agency moves to be made, and some other good names to be available, like defensive end Jadeveon Clowney and tight end Dalton Schultz.